so you know.
Okay. All right. The hour of 7 o'clock having arrived, I'd like to call this May 14th meeting of Carlisle Borough Council to order. Town Hall remains closed to the public for this meeting, but we are joining you virtually, and this measure is being taken to comply with Governor Wolf's stay-at-home order and to practice proper social distancing. And we also welcome those of you who are joining us either via Zoom or our YouTube channel. Thank you very much. We know you have a lot of things going on in your lives right now, so we appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening. And now, if we will all please rise for a moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance led by Councillor Fulham Winston, please. And councillors, please mute your audio.
Good evening. Oh, no, I am unmuted. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, I would ask everyone to remember that we are all in this together. Essential workers such as medical staff, maintenance staff, grocery store workers, police officers, home delivery drivers, firefighters, long distance truck drivers, the folks who pick up your trash, nonprofit organization staff, EMS professionals, and government workers are all out of their homes every day taking risks so that we can stay safe. It is up to each of us to play our part by wearing masks when close to others, keeping social distance when shopping, walking, or jogging, and trying to be as safe as possible. According to some experts, it could be spring or summer 2021 before there is an effective vaccine, so we need to commit to keeping our communities as whole and healthy as possible for the long run, because we are all in this together. And now the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councillor Fulham Winston. We will now proceed with our roll call. Madam Secretary, if you please.
Mr. Cramsey? Mr. Cramsey?
Here. Sorry, on mute.
Okay. Ms. Fulham Winston?
Here.
Mr. Hicks?
Present.
Ms. Landis?
Here.
Mr. Schultz?
Here.
Mayor Scott?
Here.
Mr. Stubbe?
Here.
Mr. Spear?
Here.
All right, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is a presentation by Paige Baisley, who will be discussing a Carlisle Municipal composting proposal. Paige, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much for having me. I'm gonna share my screen, but I'll be presenting a project that I was working on this past semester in Professor Beatty's environmental studies seminar through Dickinson College. Sorry. So this past semester, I was looking at different ways to incorporate potentially municipal composting program in Carlisle. And so I was looking at mostly from the infrastructure end, what sort of infrastructure Carlisle already has for waste management and what might be necessary for a municipal waste program. So I believe I sent this, hopefully all of you had a chance to look this over. If not, hopefully it's in your possession. But I drew up a plan that details potential actions that Carlisle could take if they want to implement a program similar to this in the future. Mostly just suggestions based on typical composting programs and what's been successful in similar towns. So I'll run through the kind of an outline of what I did, and if anyone has questions for me, please feel free to ask. Is there, I guess, what kind of time limit should I be aiming for with this?
Paige, we all have your presentation, and it didn't look like it was going to take very long, so you can just roll through it. And
okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So with the beginnings of the report. So this report outlines the benefits of including municipal compost in Carlisle's waste management program, and it makes suggestions about infrastructure that is necessary for successful municipal composting program in Carlisle based on current resources available, including existing waste management infrastructure, and it draws on recommendations from the Environmental Protection Agency and key lessons learned from other successful composting programs. So the main takeaways from why compost is a necessary part of sustainable waste management is that compost provides a solution to the environmental challenge of food waste disposal and provides additional environmental benefits to agriculture systems, which are abundant around Carlisle. Food waste, when it is left in landfills or processed through incineration, it produces methane, which is a really potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change by trapping excess heat in the atmosphere. But when it's composted, a lot of those, it'll break down differently, and then it can be used as a nutrient source in agriculture and home gardens, and also would produce fewer greenhouse gases, less potent ones. Compost, the basics of composting is combining organic wastes such as food waste, yard trimmings, and manures, and then adding some bulking agents such as wood chips and allowing the material to sit and stabilize with some aeration, and the microbes will help break down the compost. The EPA recognizes composting as the second tier on their food recovery hierarchy, with source production and feeding hungry people towards the top, something like food pantries or Project Share like Carlisle already has, but composting could be an extra step for food that can't be diverted in that way. And then compost can also be used in agriculture systems. And then looking at Carlisle's waste management programs, from what I could find, I was mostly using the Cumberland County Waste Management Authority, the plan that they provided in 2015, and that plan recognized that competitive market conditions between waste disposal groups dictate the main destinations of waste in Cumberland County. And right now, that's predominantly with landfills and incineration facilities with some recycling plants. And the recycling program that was detailed in this plan successfully decreased the amount of recyclables directed into landfills, which suggests that alternative disposal options could be successful if we're looking at decreasing food waste. It would definitely require, changing the way that people think about waste, probably similar to how instituting recycling came about. But right now, organic waste comprises the largest percentage of residential waste in Pennsylvania. That was of 2015, detailed in that plan. And looking at composting programs compared to other programs, trash programs and recycling programs, the composting programs tend to be about a third the cost of trash collection programs. And that's for like community members who would be utilizing the programs. I didn't look too much into the economics specifically for Carlisle, mostly because that's not my area of expertise. And so I didn't feel like I could accurately analyze that, but I definitely have some resources I could share with you if that's something that you're interested in looking more into. The EPA has documented successful food waste collection programs in communities of similar size, demographic, and layout to Carlisle, and areas with local colleges or universities are a common factor among towns that are successful. And since Dickinson College already has a composting program for the food waste in their cafeteria, this is potentially something that could be expanded, or working with the college to see what has already worked for them, what might work in the rest of Carlisle. One composting company that I had contact with to talk about their methods and how they got started was Community Compost Company. It is located in New Paltz, New York, which is a college town in the agriculture-rich area of the Hudson Valley in upstate New York. That's around where I'm from. But again, it's similar in layout and demographic to Carlisle, with the surrounding farms, and it's also a college town. And they've actually managed to partner with local waste collection groups and farms to help develop a model that supports a wide variety of customers. They do residential compost collection as well as commercial compost collection. And so I used what the EPA has documented, as well as this program and other programs like it, to help create suggestions for a pilot program in Carlisle, with potentially a subset of Carlisle's residents. And then, so looking at the options for a compost facility in Carlisle, the yard waste compost facility that's available, that is currently on Post Road in Carlisle, PA, can potentially be adapted to accept food waste with a few alterations. This has actually been a process that has been successfully done by other composting programs and is recommended, that yard waste facilities can be adapted to collect food waste with few alterations. There would be some review required of our compost facility to figure out what exactly would be needed to be done to accept food waste, but some likely changes would be that the facility would have to be prepared to handle a higher volume of compostables. I think right now the composting facility is not open all year round and only accepts drop off on certain days. So potentially extending that, or having the pilot program first operate within the initial operating times that this compost facility was already open during. Potentially altering the composting recipe. So this might include changing the amount or the type of wood chips or other bulking materials added to the compost. If it's still accepting yard waste, that could be included in the bulking materials. And then also adjusting the management practices, such as aerating techniques to better manage odor and moisture levels that would come along with increased food waste. And then collection methods. Research on existing successful composting programs suggests that programs with a curbside collection of residential compost have a higher participation and diversion rates than programs with drop-off only compost. However, curbside collection is also more labor intensive and requires more planning and resources. And since the yard waste collection in Carlisle does not occur on a weekly basis and it is drop-off only, there's no framework to provide an easy transition into food waste collection. So I would recommend starting the pilot program with a drop-off program, where residents can drop off their food waste either directly at the composting plant or at some satellite locations, just because this would make an easier transition and less work for the town. But if they do want to explore some sort of collection, that would potentially be more accessible for the customers. Looking at the drop-off locations, and what they should have is that drop-off days should be limited to help control odor and just kind of maximize like when things are picked up compared to when things are dropped off, to have a bit more control over the volume of food waste that's left there and for how long it's left there. The dumpsters should have the capacity to handle liquids, because food waste can also include liquids. And then also access should be limited to only participating members of the program, because it is important. Only specific things can be composted, and also just to like limit contamination and other things like that. So I pinpointed 3 potential drop-off locations. These could definitely be revised or expanded, but mainly drop-off sites must be easily accessible, geographically dispersed, and have the capacity to receive food waste. So I was focusing on the easily accessible and geographically dispersed, because I don't have as much knowledge of the capabilities and what sorts of resources could be provided. So I recommended the compost facility on Old Post Road, if that's where the composting would be occurring. Farmers on the Square, because that's a pretty central location. And if there was a stand there, people could provide information on it and potentially attract a demographic that might be most interested in composting. And then also potentially the YWCA on 301 G Street in Carlisle, mainly for its geographic location, and then also because it was have pretty accessible hours. Looking at collection materials, typically composting programs provide tight closing toters or other bins for their participants, but that can be an extra expense. So sometimes if the customers want to use their own bins, that might be an option to look into. And then also if the program didn't want to have the expense to provide bins, any tight closing bins can be viable compost containers. And other programs in similar areas haven't had issues with wild animals being attracted to the scents, but that can be something that customers may be concerned about. And then looking at just the way that Carlisle has their waste disposal set up, the pay-as-you-throw garbage bag policy in Carlisle may actually assist with implementing a composting program because residents are already familiar with the payment method that, and since composting typically costs less than regular trash disposal, it may reduce their overall expenses. And then looking into education, education around composting is a really important factor to getting people involved once the infrastructure is set up. And the primary goals of education should be to increase knowledge about compostables and to reduce the yuck factor surrounding compost, because lack of knowledge and the yuck factor are the most prominent barriers to participation. And this can be done through signage. If there was a booth potentially set up at Farmers on the Square, that could be a good way to interact with people or potentially hand out pamphlets. Some organizations have included a quiz at the time of sign up, or like that kind of maybe gets renewed in a monthly newsletter just to make sure that it's at the front of people's mind and people are reminded of what materials can be composted. I think that would definitely be something to look more into and examine from a more social science perspective to see how people would respond to quizzes and things like that, because it's important that people are informed, but also we want to limit the barriers to participation. And I know sometimes that quizzes or things like that can be a little bit of a turnoff for people. But one phrasing that's pretty simple, but that has actually been shown to be very effective is talking about composting as the product that it is instead of a waste material, because then it reframes the idea and can reduce the yuck factor if people are thinking of food waste as something gross and smelly that just needs to be out of their house, versus as something that's compost that can be used in a productive manner and can really aid in the food system. That might change people's perspective and have them more receptive to a composting program. And then education should get community members involved, and they could potentially partner with Farmers on the Square, as I mentioned, Dickinson College students, or LEAF. I know these groups all do sustainability education, and potentially partnering with the Dickinson College Farm that already has compost initiatives and does composting education with schools could be another option. And then moving to, if we're looking at other options within a pilot program or expanding outside of a pilot program, the compost facility on Old Post Road is one option that, since that already exists as a composting facility, it could be easily transformed. But if we need a larger space, potentially partnering with local farms can be an option. The community compost company that I mentioned earlier processes their compost from multiple municipalities onto one farm, because farms already have the space and equipment that's helpful in processing compost. These images are from the Dickinson College Farm. And so looking either at the Dickinson College Farm or at other farms in the area that might be interested in hosting a composting facility, if they have the space and materials for it. And then also they could be used, the farms could take part in partnerships. They could also be outlets for the finished compost, purchasing the compost once it's done, either at a reduced rate or in return for their space. And the compost can also be marketed to community members. And this could potentially support the program financially, as well as then having a source for the finished compost. Other partnerships that should be looked at is looking at the waste collection facilities that already exist. If there was, say, collection to occur, maybe using trucks that they already have, using their transfer stations or dumpsters to reduce the cost of labor required to expand the program. As I mentioned before, Community Compost Company has successfully partnered with other waste management programs, mainly using their transfer stations to serve as a midway between the municipalities that they're collecting from and then the farms where they process the compost. So my final suggestions, looking at the infrastructure necessary for a composting pilot program in Carlisle, would be to adjust the yard waste composting facility to be able to collect food waste, establish compost drop-off locations around Carlisle, potentially utilize existing waste management infrastructure to help transport the compost, should curbside collection be chosen, and then also educate community members about composting. Because in Carlisle, a municipal composting program will incite a shift towards reduction of materials to landfills, and shifting practices of disposal will contribute to long-term changes in perceptions of waste and consumer practices. A municipal compost program may help the community by reducing disposal costs for Carlisle residents. And additionally, and possibly most importantly, is that valuing food waste and compost as a product creates a closed loop system that retains compost as a community resource and helps support local food production. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think that this is, I see this as more of a suggestion that the Carlisle community could use for future development of a composting program. And I hope that it provides a valuable framework or valuable information that could be expanded upon in the future.
Thank you, Paige. It's definitely some valuable information. And as you know, we recently had an increase in costs for waste disposal to our residents. So this is something that can be looked at as a way to help reduce those costs a little bit. I think it's well researched, well thought out, and you've given us a roadmap here for the future. So thank you very much. Any questions from council members? I'll just start and run down the line. Deb Fulham-Winston.
Just wanted to say that I also think it's a really intriguing idea, and that the idea of diverting that anything from the landfill sounds like a great first step. I think there are a lot of details that would need to be worked out, but in general, I think it's a grand idea.
Thank you very much. Joel Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Paige, very much. One of the fastest growing sources of energy, of renewable energy, is waste to energy. I'll be curious to know if you had any ideas about scale or cost that might make that a potential useful solution to this.
Are you talking about through like incineration or through biogas or other?
I think mostly through biogas.
Biogas. I'm not sure cost related. I know the Dickinson farm does produce biogas that they use, and they're looking to expand their biogas facility. So I would recommend reaching out to Matt Steinman, or I could put him in touch with you. He would probably be able to either point you towards resources that could determine cost or give you a better idea of that. I know that they built the facility they have right now is kind of built on their own from materials that they had. And so I don't think it was a very high budget thing at all, but it's also pretty small scale.
Great. Yeah, I'll reach out to Matt. Thanks, Paige. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Joel. Brenda Landis.
Thanks, Paige. I'm really happy this worked out and we were able to hear your presentation. It was very thorough, and I really appreciate your time and investment. And I agree with everyone. I also just I like when presentations like this come through and you give a scaled model. I love the word pilot because it seems so like no one has to worry. We're not going to do anything crazy, but we're going to just test it. And I think that being able to look at that and realizing that, just like Deb said, it will take a bit to really make something big happen. But I've been to the Dickinson Farm a number of times over the years, and their composting program has expanded since they first opened. So I mean, it's not like what they have now was there in '08. And I also really like, and our friend Stephanie, who does our social media, also would love how you phrase the yuck factor and turn in, how people see things and evaluate what community compost really is. So I like your techniques of actually thinking about what it's really going to look like when it's out in the public. And so I think all of this is extremely helpful. And you really did a thorough job of figuring out what our questions were going to be. So I don't actually have many questions, just a whole lot of kudos.
Thank you very much.
Well deserved too. Sean Crampsey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Paige. This was great. I think this is a great kickstart.
Into your mic.
Oh, sorry. I think this is a great kickstart to the conversation, and the information was very thorough. And I also like how you outlined different options for us. So as you were talking, I was thinking, to Brenda's point, a pilot is great, but also knowing that there's options to do, a drop off directly at the site instead of rolling out a curbside pickup. I think that takes into account our borough resources and finances, and might be a good option to start with. We started composting at my house, and to the mayor's point, I think we're down to, 1 borough bag a month, if that. So it really does make a difference in the community when you're talking about cost savings and environmentally friendly. And I'm not sure if all compost sites take this, but I mean, grass clippings and leaves, if those are eligible, that's another huge, I think, benefit, and something that we can explore that might actually help some of our borough resources. So I think this is a great start to the conversation. Thank you for all your work on it.
Thank you.
Right. Deputy Mayor, who has the world on his shoulders.
It only feels like it sometimes.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, I think this dovetails really well with the resolution we have before us later on tonight. Particularly the co-benefits that can be found in programs like this. And I think you'd see, if you look back at recycling programs decades ago, they had many of the same challenges that we're overcoming. Now we take those programs for granted. We had to sort of inch our way there. And I think Stephanie Taylor might feel like people are already doing some of this in their recycling bins from the pictures that she sees, among other things.
They are.
I also think it could be a great opportunity for to address environmental justice in our community, and the program can kind of reach out to minority communities that are too often overlooked, and the impacts on those communities that are disproportionate to different sections of our community.
Good point.
Thank you very much, Paige.
Very good point. Jeff Stubbe.
I would just echo my fellow counselors' comments and say thank you, Paige, for your presentation. I think this is a really excellent concept, and I think it's something that we should definitely explore further and see how we could implement something along these lines in Carlisle.
Great. And last but not least, our law school ambassador, Mr. Spears.
No questions from me, but I have to say, I've got to echo everything I've already said. Major kudos, because I'm always looking for ways personally to change my habits to help affect the environment in a positive way. With everyone staying inside, we've already seen some of the changes that can be had just by people not driving everywhere. So imagine if everyone else actually started composting the way we're supposed to, the changes that might be seen in our environment that way. So major kudos.
Right. And again, thank you very much, Paige. And without objection, I will just let staff know if you could just take this proposal from Paige and give it a look, and we can talk about it at a future council workshop, try to iron out some kinks. So with that, without objection, we'll go ahead and do that. And next, we'll move on. I don't believe there's any other citizens waiting to be heard. We received no questions or requests. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. And the following is a list of routine items which do not appear to be controversial in nature and which probably do not require additional discussion. They can be acted on by one motion in their current form. If discussion is desired on any particular item, any member of council or the public may request that item be removed from the consent agenda, and that item will be considered separately. For members of council, is there any such item on the consent agenda you'd like to see removed and discussed separately? Okay. Any member of the public? All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve items A through F on pages 1 and 2 of tonight's agenda.
So moved.
It's moved by Deputy Mayor Schultz. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Brenda Landis. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you very much. If you were tuning in for any of those items, it has been dealt with. Moving on to page 3 is the regular agenda. There are no tabled continued or recurring items to consider. So we'll move into reports from elected officials. And first up is Mayor's report. And I have a proclamation. Tonight, I have drafted a proclamation recognizing Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day. And it's a chance for us to commend the brave men and women of our law enforcement community for continuing to summon the courage to fulfill their sworn oath to protect and serve. And this includes those that we've lost this year to COVID-19. Therefore, I would ask for unanimous consent from council to reaffirm the proclamation. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. My proclamation is reaffirmed by council. And Chief Landis, if you're on the line, would you like to make a few remarks?
I would just like to thank you for.
Oh, you're muted again.
Thank you for recognizing the law enforcement, especially the work that we lost to COVID-19.
Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate all your officers do. Next up under Mayor's report is the COVID-19 economic community recovery, and I will hand things off to Councilor Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we all look forward to safely restoring business activity in Carlisle, hopefully within the next several weeks. But as such, I believe it's appropriate that we begin to discuss with local businesses ways in which Borough Council and staff can responsibly assist businesses in accommodating new public health measures while sustaining a viable customer base. So I think we need to solicit ideas from business owners and customers about ways in which the borough government could, one, identify ordinances and zoning rules that could be temporarily lifted during the public health crisis, and two, temporarily repurposing public space for local business activity. And I would invite inputs that examine a wide range of options that could possibly include street closures for pedestrian-only access, quasi-permanent structures on public property and or streets, parking enforcement changes, public hand washing stations, and other possible accommodations. Those are just ideas. Of course, any measures that we take to do this will only be as effective as the collective input we receive from our local businesses and business patrons. So subject to discussion, and I hope we have one this evening, I propose we we plan to hold a public, albeit virtual meeting about this topic. I would suggest within the next 7 to 10 days after advertisement, and utilize our outstanding social media presence to solicit inputs for this purpose. And I would, of course, want to make sure all of this was closely supported with our solicitor. So I'd like to open this up for the council to discuss further.
All right. Deputy Mayor Schultz, anything?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to speak with some businesses directly this week, and I'm not going to run down. It was sort of a feedback session, and I won't run down some of the ideas that were generated there because I think we'll get that when the time comes. But the overall view of it was obviously they're suffering a lot, or suffering more than others based on the type of industry they're in. I think Councilor Hicks made a great point that we need to try to be as flexible in the borough, both in what we open up for use, including things like streets or even parks, because we currently have a prohibition on any sort of commercial use of our parks, but under the circumstances, we might want to revisit that. We want to make sure that the permit processes, to the extent they're needed, are as seamless and friction-free as possible. I think this is a great idea to get some direct give and take with council and how we can work best to ensure that the borough government is providing the infrastructure that they need to recover.
Great, thank you. Councilor Landis.
This is all music to my ears, is what it is. This is just exactly what we as officials should be doing. We should be asking questions of how we can cut through the processes that we have, which are, in normal days, they seem like they're needed and effective, and they usually are. But I do think that there's lots of questions of like, how can we expedite some of these changes? As Paige, talked about pilot programs, we're going to try some things and maybe we're going to end up adapting a little bit, not necessarily always thinking like, does it work or not? And is it scrapped? It's more of how is this going to look at first, changing things. I said last week, and I was on the square, and I rode my bike to a meeting again tonight, even though I couldn't really ride it. But I was at the square this week, yesterday, and working with the county for their spaces as well. As Joel said, working with some of the private ownership of maybe some parking lots. But yeah, streets are public land that are usually only thought of for cars, but right now we need space for people and to think creatively and adapt as needed. So I agree to keep this speedy as possible, but working with the staff. So maybe asking some specific questions now, just to get some feedback to see how they, what some barriers are within our own ordinances, and maybe some, low-hanging fruit that we could try out pretty quickly. And there might be other things that take a little bit longer. So I think that's what I'm thinking right now, as well as getting obviously more feedback, but there could be some asks that we could ask our staff to start investigating.
Correct. Sean Cramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to, commend my colleagues who are all, working on this issue, and I think, this is going to be one of the most important issues we work on this year, if not the next few years. And I think we need to use, every tool at our disposal, and some of them were already mentioned, particularly, public streets, as we move into the yellow phase and hopefully at some point get to a green phase. I think we need to be creative, think outside of the box, cut the red tape wherever we can, whether it be parking. I just envision, before COVID, when we had Small Business Saturday, and really for this rebound, I think every chance we get, we need to kind of coalesce around that and have small business support wherever we can. And these are a big part of our community. So Destination Carlisle, DCA, the Chamber, these are the groups that have always been there for us and for our residents and for the softball teams and the t-ball teams and you know, big players in our community. And we need to come out in full force as much as we can. And I think Councilman Hicks mentioned it and Councilman Schultz, but it's going to be important to also get feedback from those businesses as much as possible, so we know where our blind spots are and some things that we may not think of in this moment that may pop up. So any way we can help, I think, you know, this is going to be a huge initiative for us, but I think just having this conversation and showing our willingness to be able to support these businesses and the safety of our residents, right? We want to do it the right way. We're probably only going to have one shot at this. So we want to make sure it's a smooth process, it's a safe process, and it helps everyone bounce back.
Right. And you mentioned Small Business Saturday. Every Saturday should be Small Business Saturday from here on out, as far as I'm concerned. Deb Fulham-Winston.
Sorry. I saw in the news tonight that Seattle has closed 20 miles of road within the city to create more opportunities for social distancing. So they're looking at their public spaces in different ways. And I think, as Brenda was saying, we can't be static about this. And normal is gone. We are moving into something different, and we don't know what its shape and size and texture is going to be, but we have to be open to be looking at as many different kinds of ways to help the community be strong as we possibly can. And if that means getting rid of red tape or rethinking the parks or whatever, I think we need to have as many different and new ideas as we possibly can so that we can be responsive. And we have very different kinds of businesses, so they will have different needs, and recognizing that. And I think the other thing we need to kind of keep in the back of our heads, again, looking back at the science, is that there's every chance that this fall we're going to have another spike. And we need to figure out a way to help reduce that spike as much as we possibly can by working together to create the healthiest community possible.
Absolutely. Jeff Stubbe.
I think this is definitely a worthy topic to discuss. I would just say that it's probably important that we come up with, to Councilor Hicks' point, as many tangible things that we can, so that ideally when we're meeting next month, we can really act on things. I mean, I think this is great to talk about things, you know, to be frank, in generalities, which we're kind of doing right now. And I don't personally have any grand suggestions, but it sounds like there are some business owners in our community that likely do. And I think being able to take those recommendations that staff has, and act on them sooner rather than later would be great. So I think just if we can, you know, move from this point to having concrete steps that we can take, that would be great.
That's good. Stephen, from the law school's perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, but does law school have like a policy center? Is it mostly just focused on like legal policy, or would this be something they could dive into too, looking at best practices for supporting businesses?
So we don't actually have a policy center, if you will. We do have an entrepreneurship law society that works in that area. They're always looking for innovative solutions to new problems that can be solved through the law. I know Penn State is working hard on some of this stuff as well as a university. So that is one positive that Penn State is drawing out of this epidemic, is that they're looking for new and innovative ways of doing business, which I am always excited to hear. So I'm excited to see what some of the solutions are that are going to be put forward that we will actually continue to use after all this is done. But as far as the law school is concerned, we're changing how we're doing business as well. It's something that's hit everybody hard, unfortunately. And we're going to see some new changes, and I'm looking forward to seeing what those changes are going to be.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that perspective. And I'll just close it out by reminding everyone that the National League of Cities, which the borough is a part of, is all about best practices. And they put out a blog post recently that talked about actions that cities and municipalities can take right now to help small businesses, and there's 5 of them. The first is tax payment deferrals, which we're going to do a little bit later, and extensions of discount periods on property taxes. Second, creating a relief fund for direct financial support to businesses with a variety of options. That's something that we've also talked about through our community development block grants. Third, enhanced help to businesses applying for SBA loans. I know that the Chamber of Commerce and the DCA do a very good job, but we can always operate in that space too to provide that linkage. And fourth, gaining data through surveys and roundtable discussions, just as the deputy mayor did earlier this week. We can also convene roundtables, which is what I think we're talking about as well. And finally, the borough being an online repository for recovery information. And we need to do that, even if it's just posting links to other people's resources, we need to promote that. That is the key. Use our own social media and leverage that to get the information out to people. So those are just 5 suggestions that I particularly like from the National League of Cities. Anything further on this? I think that Joel and Sean have outlined a good plan, and we'll turn it over to staff to help us implement it, and then we will reconvene and talk about that a couple weeks, if that sounds good to everybody.
Tim, I'll just say that, I've been reading a lot about this, and I have seen lots of blog posts and like great ideas, but there are a couple places that I've seen that have actually, changed ordinances and adapted some things. So I was going to dig into those articles to go back to their sites and see if I could find some of them. So anyone else, be it the public or council or anyone, if you see something like that and we actually see that something is passed, I think that it would be interesting and helpful to see what their documents, their legal documents actually look like, and that might help us expedite some of this work.
That's right. Everybody has our email addresses and know how to reach us, so please don't be shy and forward your suggestions to us, and we will take a look. All right, thank you very much. With that, we'll go on to reports from committees. Budget and Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I have tonight is something we discussed at our prior workshop, and you noted the property tax relief. As part of Act 15 of 2020, the General Assembly passed and the governor signed into law a statute that did a number of things, one of which was to permit taxing jurisdictions like the borough and the county to extend the discount period on real estate tax and to extend the face value period on real estate tax. As we last discussed this item, what we wanted to do was make sure that what we did married up to what the county did, because it's the same tax collector dealing with that, and we did not want to cause any confusion among our taxpayers. So what we have before us this evening is a resolution to waive the penalty rate on the payment of real estate taxes through the end of October of this year. So that means people could continue to pay at the face value through that time period. So with that said, I make a motion to, trying to jump around here. Make a motion that council adopt a resolution to provide real property tax relief related to the payment of municipal real estate taxes due to the COVID-19 disaster emergency.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Schultz makes a motion to provide real property tax relief. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Councilor Crampsey. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Public Works.
Public Works. We are moving forward with another project, with a project that will continue to work on the interceptor, and I asked Borough Council to award the unit price construction contract for the pump #1 interceptor sewer lining and manhole repair project to the lowest responsive bidder, Aegeon Incorporated of Warrendale, Pennsylvania, in the amount of $151,901. pending receipt of the required bonds and insurances for the project. Borough Council may also authorize any contract change order needing prompt action in the amount not to exceed $10,000 each to be approved at the discretion of the Borough Manager and brought before Council for retroactive approval.
Thank you. Ms. Fulham Winston makes a motion to approve a contract with Aegeon Incorporated for our Pump Station Number 1 Interceptor sewer lining and manhole repair project. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Landis. Any further discussion on this matter? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. And Deb, I believe that ends your report.
Yes, that does end my report.
Thank you very much. Moving on to new business. Is there anyone who would like to bring a fresh matter before Borough Council that has not been previously considered? See, we have two folks watching, or on the Zoom anyway, and one of them is Zach Hoops. So I don't know if he has a question. He may not. Okay. All right, moving on to reports from council members. I will just go round robin here. Deb Fulham Winston.
Just have participated in the calls with the community group and also with the Partnership for Better Health. And I am so proud to live here because the level at which people are standing up to support our community, I think, is truly amazing and something that we should be extremely proud about.
Thank you very much. Joel Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just with the council's consent, since we did approve the resolution for climate action commitments, we are now in a process where we need to convene a climate action committee, and I would be happy with council's consent in coordination with a deputy mayor to work with borough staff to take the next steps in bringing that committee together and to advertise for it and to assemble it.
I believe you have unanimous consent. I don't see any heads not shaking, so you go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll work with the borough manager, and hopefully in the next week or two, we can come up with a good plan to form a committee. Thank you. That's all I have.
Fantastic. Councilor Landis.
I want to give a bunch of thank yous to our staff. I mean, I can thank every single staff that we have, but first of all, I want to thank Susan and Mark for working so hard on a request that I've had for a while, and I've heard that it is now implemented, and that is ceasing to have to push the buttons at the square to walk across the street. And although we know that there are other push buttons, but there are state reasons why we can't do it everywhere. But we're, again, pilots, small wins, celebrate them, thank people that worked hard to get us where we are. I was on the square yesterday, as you can see, and it was vibrant and it was safe and everyone was social distancing, but we were able to support our market, and it was really wonderful to see so many people out using our sidewalks and walking and biking. And so I, although this is a terrible time that we are living through, and we're trying to, support everyone, it is, as Deb said, it's really reassuring to live in this community and to see how people are so supportive. My other thank you and just sort of kudos is to our parks staff. They're doing such a great job of educating and reconnecting people to the many spaces that we have here. We are rich with park spaces, and it's more important now than ever. And so on the Facebook pages, they take you on daily walks, and I think that people get to go out and now go to see the places, the little specific things. And I love details, so I love all the details that have been coming out in these videos, because they those are the things that I notice and I want other people to notice, and the park staff notice, and it's just little things like that. I mean, everyone's doing a really great job, but this is the time. It's strange that there are some places that are shining, but our parks are shining during this time, and I'm really proud of that. So I see Andrea's on here.
Thank you, Brenda. Kelsey's been working on that, so she's been doing a great job on that. So that has been her project. So I have to give kudos to her.
Yes, well, everyone should follow them on Facebook, and then they should go out to the parks and enjoy them. Thank you. So that completes my report.
Thank you. Sean Cramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just have a few quick items tonight. Wanted to echo Brenda's comments and thank staff for all the hard work that they do, and also thank Susan, Owen, and Stephanie for getting us up and running on Zoom, also on Facebook. I see a bunch of people are watching. We actually have a lot of interest there, and there's a lot of comments. So I think that's cool too. That's hopefully something we can keep moving into the future using YouTube, Facebook, and Zoom. I think it's really beneficial for our residents. I also wanted to thank our residents and everyone in the community for staying strong during this time. It hasn't been easy, I don't think, for anyone. But overall, as a community, I think we're doing our best. Just wanted to encourage everyone to continue hanging in there, even as the weather gets better and we move from red to yellow to hopefully green. That doesn't mean we should let up. Continue wearing your masks, washing your hands, practicing social distancing, just doing everything that everyone's already been doing. And then the last two items I wanted to leave everyone with, please fill out the census. If you haven't filled out the census, we really, really need folks. I know Stephanie has been posting on her social media the percentage in the borough, and it's been decent, but it needs to be better. We need to get those numbers up to make sure that we don't miss out on the very important funding that comes with that. And then last, I'll end with, please also go to the borough's social media and look at the changes for the upcoming June 2nd primary election. With regard to the polling places, there are a few that have changed. That's very important. And also go to votespa.com. May 26th is the last date to request a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot. I know there's still a lot of uncertainty with COVID going on. I would recommend, if you can, request a mail-in ballot. I think that would be easier for a lot of folks and might be an easy way to make your voice heard. So just encouraging everyone to vote on June 2nd, and request that mail-in ballot before it's too late. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Sean Schultz.
And on that note, be conscientious of the staff at the Bureau of Elections and try to get those ballots in early, because I know they're working probably night and day. I'm trying to work through that. I wanted to talk a little bit about discussions I've had with Borough Manager Armstrong over I think from the start of this, and especially after the CARES Act passed and it was announced that the borough would be receiving roughly $227,000 in CDBG funds. The borough manager has been working through how to process that and potentially how to utilize it to bring a recommendation back to us. We're getting near a point where we'll be able to take some action on that in the coming weeks, hopefully less than coming weeks. And I say that because there are, as you all know, so many organizations and businesses that are suffering, and this can be a sort of a source of hope locally for them. It can be a source of hope locally for those in socioeconomic circumstances that are disparately affected by this crisis. So the quicker we can get those monies out there benefiting people, the better. So I hope that we can be as flexible as possible if we need to call a special meeting to try to get that out there and get it out there quickly. The nice thing is the normal 30-day comment period has been reduced to a 5-day comment period. So that gets rid of that extra long hurdle for us. Then, of course, once we have our plan together, it has to go to HUD for a review. I understand they're prioritizing review of these plans, but they still statutorily have, or in the regulations, have up to 45 days. But I understand they're churning through them as quickly as they can. And I think we'll have more on that relatively soon.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stubbe.
I have nothing new to report at present. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Not a problem. And finally, Mr. Spears.
So I mentioned earlier that Penn State is doing things differently at the moment because of the virus outbreak. I just wanted to share a few of those things. So first of all, Penn State Hershey Med is on the front lines of this fight. They are obviously treating patients, quarantining patients, helping care for their family members. But we also have people behind the scenes at the university itself, assisting in research, vaccine preparation, the like, to see if we can bring this to a close sooner rather than later. As far as the law school is concerned, we are continuing our clinics throughout the summer. Those clinics will be socially distant from one another. We'll be doing things via webcam if we have to. And we're going to continue to bring those services to the local community. Specifically, what was just highlighted a few weeks ago was the Children's Advocacy Clinic. They are still in court with those students, trying to get them the outcomes that they deserve from our court system. And I think that was and I'm sorry, the last thing was that our law school is realizing the dream through Operation Realizing the Dream to try and celebrate our graduates who unfortunately, like many other graduates throughout the country, have had their celebrations postponed or canceled. So our law school is doing its best to attempt to reach out to those students to let them know that their contributions to our community and their achievements do truly matter and are appreciated. One of the things that I found was very interesting was we are sending a faculty member out to each and every student to hand deliver their diploma when it is safe to do so. So that's some of the steps that our law school is taking to attempt to make them feel more at home. No matter where you are in the world, we'll send somebody and find you.
Wow,
And
that's impressive.
finally, personal news just out of my back pocket is the next time you see me, I will be a changed man because I will be married as of Saturday. And I hear marriage changes a man, so I guess I'll be a changed man when you see me the next time.
Congratulations, Stephen.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
All right, thank you. And now we'll move to staff, and I'm just going to go the way these Brady Bunch squares are on here. I'll start with Stephanie Taylor, Public Information.
I don't have anything except for the meeting got very popular on Facebook, so perhaps that's where we need to put them instead of YouTube. Who knows?
Yes. Yeah,
But I'll be sure to pass along the comments that are being posted to everyone.
Great. Thank you very much. Chief Landis.
I would like to thank the Borough Council and Manager Armstrong and staff for your support of the police department. And I also want to especially thank Glenn White for his support during a trying time. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chief. Speaking of Manager Armstrong.
Yes, well, I just wanted to follow up on the COVID-19 economic and community recovery discussion. First of all, I just applaud council for your involvement. Again, I don't think the public often knows how involved you are, and you're accessible. You make yourselves accessible during this time of crisis. Each one of you have been there and are willing to do heavy lifting where and when needed, and it's very much appreciated by this community and the staff here at the Borough organization. I will say that we're looking forward to it. Staff is looking forward to creating opportunities and eliminating some of the barriers for our businesses in hopes of hopefully accelerating economic recovery. I think recovery is going, I know it will be our #1 priority as hopefully we go from the red to the yellow to the green phases. I imagine it's going to be our priority for some time. So the more that we can do on our end to hopefully accelerate recovery, the better our community will be. So we already plan to assemble a team by Monday. We have a staff meeting at 9:30, and we'll have a team assembled to start putting together our thoughts into a comprehensive way to present to Borough Council in an expeditious but also a very thoughtful way that you're to hopefully help you pave a pathway forward towards recovery. So we'll definitely, you have my assurance, we'll work on it expeditiously. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Parks and Recreation, Andrea Kraus.
I don't have anything new at this point to go over.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We just love hearing your voice.
Thank
Borough Solicitor Brenneman, anything, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing.
All right. Thank you. You've been working hard this week. So Fire Chief Snyder.
Just two items. The fire department, of course, we had a second alarm fire early Sunday morning on East North Street, and they had a huge volume of fire. They did outstanding. Very proud of the effort that they put forth to limit the damage to both the exposure buildings. The main fire building was heavily damaged. Number two is Wednesday we met the subcommittee of the Emergency Service Working Group, and we came up with 3 drafts on how to come to a standard of coverage with reduction of fire apparatus, which we'll present to the whole committee the first Wednesday in June.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Community Development, Mike Skelly. Mike. Okay.
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Okay, yep, good evening. Yeah, there's nothing to offer, but thanks for asking.
Of course, anytime. Public Works, Mark Malarick.
I have nothing for Borough Council tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. And finally, Finance Department, Richard Juday.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I also have nothing.
Okay, that makes it easy. All right, and just want to remind everyone that our next Borough Council meeting will be the workshop on June 3rd at 6 p.m. and then followed by the regular meeting of council on June 11th at 7 p.m. So thank you all for joining us during these difficult and challenging times. And remember, we're all in this together. That being said, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night.